The original PC CD-ROM version of The Seventh Guest came out 30 years ago, so let's be honest, I have no real excuse for having not played it yet. And it's surprising that I hadn't. As a huge point-and-click puzzle adventure fan, it's something I've always been curious about. So, in preparation for The Seventh Guest VR, which releases this week on PSVR2, I blasted through the original. Yes, using a walkthrough, just to know what's changed, what's missing, and what's brand new in this 2023 VR adaptation. So, let's get started. When I fired up the Seventh Guest VR for the first time, I've got to admit that I was a little worried. Walking across the boards on the dock made the camera jump up and down, and there didn't seem to be any haptics or adaptive trigger support. So I reset my console, restarted the game, loaded my save from 2 minutes in, and apparently that broke the game, where I could no longer access my lantern or pick up items with my right hand. So not off to a good start. But luckily, after starting a new game, these bugs went away forever, although haptics and adaptive trigger support remain noticeably absent. Once the game gets started though, you might not even know what you're missing. The old Stoff mansion has been brought to life in VR pretty well, although it's no longer the sleek, well-kept mansion from the original. In fact, it's been neglected for quite some time and is now covered in cobwebs, dirt, dust, and mold. Now, the coolest part of this is being able to use your spirit lantern, which not only shines a light and reveals essential clues, but also unveils the mansion in its prime. It's quite a sight to behold, and I had a hard time not shining the light everywhere and appreciating the differences. Fans of the original will also appreciate what was done with the FMV actors here as well. All new video was filmed, but it was done volumetrically, so these actors have actual depth to them in VR. Other than the FMV, The Seventh Guest uses 2 more ways to deliver the story. The original page-turning cutscene that set the stage,
and that's when the vision came. A doll.
Has now been broken up into smaller segments, and you'll find individual pages throughout the game, which I found much easier to digest, and it actually paces the story a lot better. And you'll also find vinyl, around the mansion with Stoff's voice directing you to the next room. I do have to say it's a lot of narrative that I just didn't care about, especially at first. But once you hit the halfway mark and things start heating up, it really does become more enjoyable.
Edward, is it?
Yes.
I seem to be a bit turned around.
Which brings us to the puzzles. In here is where you'll be totally on board with The Seventh Guest, or you'll lose interest completely. Each room you walk into contains about 3 or 4 puzzles, and unlike most puzzle adventures, they're not really connected to each other. There's a box over there with a puzzle, a box over here with a puzzle, and a box over there with a puzzle. And most of them are variations on puzzles you've played 1,000 times before. The game does explain this narratively later in the story, but it doesn't change the fact that this is what you're doing for hours and hours and hours, with very little else to do in between. So you solve all the puzzles, the room comes back to life, and you move on to the next room. It's an antiquated form of game design, and you're probably saying, well, yeah, Brian, this is based on a 30-year-old game, and that's true. And honestly, the original 1993 puzzles, which included a lot of spelling out words and sliding block puzzles, were even less fun. But all the puzzles here are new and completely redesigned, so while they're okay and do get better as the game progresses, it would have been much cooler to see more environmental puzzles included. For anyone not wanting to get the most out of their game, there is a decent hint system here. You pull out your little Ouija board, click on a puzzle that you're stuck on, and it gives you a really basic hint, like almost useless. And if you're still stuck, you can click on it again to get a better hint. Now, sometimes these are really helpful, and sometimes they're way too helpful, and practically tell you the answer. And what I don't love is the option to use a coin that are hidden throughout the mansion to solve the puzzle for you. I'd be fine with this if you use the coin and then watch the puzzle being solved right in front of you, but instead it's just solved. So you're never given a proper understanding of how the puzzle needed to be solved. And I can't lie, I did this twice in the game, because I couldn't even figure out where the puzzle was in the room that I was in.
Think you'll be so lucky next time.
When The Seventh Guest came out in 1993, it was the pinnacle of what video games could look and sound like at the time. Sure, it was all pre-rendered CGI video on predetermined paths, and you couldn't interact with any of it. But still, it was really impressive. So thankfully Vertigo Games remembered the high production values of the original and delivered a game with a great soundtrack, decent voice acting, and impressive visuals. The contrast and resolution could certainly be bumped up a bit, but it's hard to complain too much here. It's not a scary game by any stretch, but neither was the original. So the appeal here is definitely geared more toward puzzle fans than horror fans. The mansion retains a similar layout, with mostly the same rooms, but it's not identical. Fans will likely remember a maze in the basement, possibly one of the worst parts of the 1993 adventure, is completely missing here. The same holds true for the narrative. Vertigo retells the now classic story, almost verbatim, of toymaker Henry Stoff and the 7 guests he invited to his mansion under mysterious circumstances. But some scenes have been removed and some have been added, and trust me, it's all for the best. The best change, though, is now you can interact with practically everything. Most items are useless, but opening every drawer and cabinet, searching the mansion for hidden Stoff coins, finding every record, every music box, and every photograph was great. There's no inventory, and anything you're holding when you leave a room won't make it to the next room, which certainly felt limiting. But at least you never had to worry about having what you needed to solve any of the puzzles. Everything you need is always provided in the room that you're in.
That is no toy for a child.
In the end, the 7th Guest is a fantastic update to the classic PC game. The story is delivered better, there are far more puzzles than ever before, and clocking in at around 7 to 8 hours, obviously depending on your puzzle-solving acumen, you're definitely getting a value for your $30 here. But despite all the improvements, it still feels outdated from a design perspective, which gets tedious just a bit too fast. Played in short bursts though, the 7th Guest is a pretty good time, and there's still a lot here to appreciate.
Off with your head.
Laura. Petunia. Angela. Angela.